Yeah. Hello. Yeah.
Stationary walls.
Recording in progress.
From the council, I've never met him.
Isn't he hilarious?
He was, yeah, I met him, and then
I mean,
everybody else.
it is. When you know it, but
I
also
know.
spiritually you're trying to.
I go one way, they go the other, but I'm having a ball, so I don't care.
Yeah. Well, you haven't done English yoga before. Okay. So what's hard about that is she's.
Spent the last month writing
what poses are.
proposals to the USDOT, and then Friday night, the USDOT sent out an email saying, actually, we need to figure out appropriations first, so this is on pause.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I wish you guys could decide
I'm learning now.
how much money you had before you put out.
I just haven't got it. I got it 20 years.
I mean, in terms of the harm, the loss of a few hours.
I don't know, like I said, I'm having a ball.
All right, well, channel 17, please go ahead, start recording.
Welcome to TMAC, February 19th, someone's very special prime birthday. On a prime day. Welcome to TMAC. I am Beth Province. I am TMAC chair, and we'll go ahead and start with Greg for introduction.
I'm Greg McFarland, member of TMAC.
Hannah Falco, Development Services.
Ashley Suyak, engineering.
Joseph Gandy, Public Works.
Noah Gordon, TMAC.
Lisa Jensen, TMAC and Planning Commission. Rachel McKay, council.
Rachel Local Council.
Golden Golden, Development Services, Parking.
It's Sandra Shell of Development Services, Parking Manager.
David Keller, TMAC.
Bob Allen, I'm with MAC.
Richard Otto, TMAC. From Houston, Provo City Engineering. Hey, I'm Shore, Provo City Engineering.
I'm Ryan Kohler. I'm resident of Provo, from the area. I'm also a civil engineer with Rapids.
I do alternate as well. And then we got two on the.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and then Kendall and Jim, can you introduce yourself?
Kendall Thurston.
And Jim? Can you hear me?
Hello.
And Jim.
Jim's also an alternate, and then Kendall is a member of the TMAC as well. So we got a full house of our TMAC members as well as our alternates, so it's great to have everybody here.
Yes, great to have you guys here. First, we want to go ahead and do our action item to approve the minutes from the January 15th TMAC meeting. Does anybody have any changes or anything that they want to bring forth, or just go straight to approving the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Thank you, Greg. Have a second? Thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, we have a very, very special presentation today, which I'm actually really excited to hear all about, and I will let Vern go ahead and introduce him.
So we've invited Bob Allen here from Mountain Land Association of Governments. Bob is the Transportation Improvement Program Manager over at MAG. We've known Bob for many years. We both have gray hair and both live in the same city.
Must be in the water.
Yeah, I think so. Must be. So I see Bob around town, and whenever I see him, it's a 20-minute conversation. So, grateful to have Bob here. Our Metropolitan Planning Organization does a regional transportation plan every 4 years. And I want to steal Bob's thunder, but he has a presentation for us. As soon as they adopt one, which is usually June, and they'll be adopting one June of next year in 2027. It's usually about a 30-year plan. They immediately start working on the next. They might take a week's vacation or something. Then they start right away, right on the next plan. And that's just kind of how it works in the world of MPOs, because they're required by federal statute to go ahead and adopt a regional transportation plan every 4 years. So with that, I thought it would be a good start to the new year, because we're spending this year identifying projects and running travel demand models and taking a look at the entire region. And we've had some TAC workshops, or Technical Advisory Committee workshops, which Noah is on. And then we've had right in the middle of our elected officials workshop, which Councilor McKay attended. When was that? Tuesday night we were there? Tuesday night, and along with the mayor and Councilor Garrett as well. So we play a major role in providing input to the RTP, and so I'll turn it over to Bob.
Great, thank you. Well, for many of you, this is, presentations like this, it's a little bit hard because some people like Noah or Vern, or some of you probably have been through this, you know almost better than I do about this stuff, and some people might be new. So I'm just going to go through a kind of a very high level understanding of what an MPO is, what an MPO does, and then obviously leave time for questions afterwards. Mountain Land, our goals and our mission statement, blah, blah, blah. We want to help our communities grow and develop and maintain quality of life. You can go to the next slide. So what is a MPO? Anytime a urban area raises to a population above 50,000, state law says, or excuse me, federal law says there needs to be a metropolitan planning organization organized. And basically the elevator speech, when people say, Bob, what do you do? What's an MPO? Basically, the way I put it is, every time you pump gas into your car, you pay federal gas tax, right? And a lot of that money comes back to the state or the region, but they're kind of like, well, we don't want every little city fighting over it. We need an organization that helps the cities come together, the communities as a whole, think regionally, and come up with how we're going to develop our transportation network from a regional standpoint. When it gets down to the local level, local streets, local projects, we're pretty hands off on that. We're interested in it, but our reason for being is to look at the regional level of stuff. Our board is comprised of all the mayors, county commissioners within our region, which is basically Utah County. Why don't you go to the next slide? And basically, out of federal law, it says, MPOs are to make sure that transportation is planned on a continuing, cooperative, and a comprehensive process. And one nice thing about having an MPO is it allows local communities to have a greater voice on regional issues. We are kind of the go-between a lot of times between local communities and the state, local communities and the federal government when it comes to transportation projects, working with FTA, FHWA, et cetera, And essentially we have a few mandates. Well, we have a lot of mandates from the federal government, but there's two main products that we have to create. If you'll go to the next slide. I'll get to those in a second, but the question I always get, and I think I'm going to try starting off with this. People ask me, Bob, how does an idea turn into a project? How does an issue turn into a project? And so this is a very high level kind of flow chart, and then we're going to get into the specifics of each of kind of the steps. The first issue is we need to identify a need. What is the need that we're trying to deal with? Maybe that's new congestion that is growing or coming up, or new growth in general that leads to congestion. Maybe there's a safety concern in an area, or potentially could be something like new transportation modes. We are starting to hear more and more about unmanned aerial vehicles or innovative transportation systems, or even we're getting questions about autonomous vehicles and how will that be planned for in the future. And so there's a lot of different things that we try to look at or that will trigger, hey, we need to start talking about this problem and coming up with a solution for it. The next step of it, it really goes into the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan, as Vern mentioned. The way I like to explain what a RTP is it's kind of like your city's general plan. Your city's general plan, you say, in 20 or 30 years, this is kind of what we want to look like. These are some things, policies that are going to kind of point us in that direction. But you don't necessarily specify this is how much money we're going to spend on this project and this is how much money we're going to spend on this project. It's not even your zoning code necessarily. It's just, hey, this is how this is a vision for our future and some things that will help guide us that way. The RTP is a lot like that. We're looking out into the future for 30 years and say, what do we want to be like when we grow up, right? So in developing that, and this is what Vern talked about, we go through a lot of steps. We work with the locals. We look at your local plans and goals. We create our own local and regional goals that we build the plan around. We develop a lot of data. This is where we really work closely with communities to get land use data, your transportation network data, et cetera, et cetera. That typically can lead to things like corridor studies. Many of you are familiar. Provo's done many corridor studies over the years. As we develop this, we also have to pay attention to air quality conformity. Some of you probably know what that is, some may not. As not surprising to you, we exceed certain national air quality standards here in the region. And so that creates certain rules and extra steps that we have to follow to be in conformity, right? Anytime we plan, we have to show that that big plan that we have for 30 years is still going to allow us to maintain air quality standards, at least where we're at, kind of thing. If we exceed that, then things get a little bit dicey. Luckily for us, though, air quality standards are adjusting, and we don't foresee that being a big problem. New fuels, new fleet turnover does a lot to help us with that. We take all this information and we end up with a bunch of projects, and we have to go through the process of kind of prioritizing them and phasing them. The first thing that we do, and I'll talk through this, is we worry about the needs of what do we need to build, and then we have to talk about, well, how do we prioritize it? Because again, the federal government requires that our plan be fiscally constrained. That's basically a simple way of saying we have to show within reason how much revenue we think we will get through the life of the plan. So up to 2055, that's $25–30 billion worth of revenue we think we get. Can we build everything we need with that budget? The answer is no. So we have to start thinking about prioritizing and phasing and things like that. Once the project is in the RTP, that general plan, then it needs to be programmed, or how do we actually get money to build the project? There's two main ways to do that. The first one is the UDOT prioritization process. It's really important to understand that there's a big difference. A lot of people say, oh, we'll just go get money from MAG for that, or MAG's, doing this, and MAG's not funding this project. The reality of it is, and I'll show you this in a minute, MAG spends we have control over about year to year, it's about $60 million worth of funds. So there's not too many interchanges that can be built for that kind of money, right? Or major facilities that can be built for that kind of money. But UDOT has its own process, right? Their revenue is closer to like $1 billion a year, depending on what the legislature says and does to them. So they have a process that happens every year, and they're the ones that build the big stuff, right? Interchanges, freeways, principal arterials, et cetera, et cetera. They do it every year. MAG, we have our own set of funds that we have stewardship over, I'll say, that we can program. We do it, all those projects, so all of the UDOT projects needs to be in phase 1 of the plan, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. MAG projects, they also need to be in the phase 1 of the plan or supported by it. They're regionally significant roads, but not the big stuff, right? Like the average project that we fund is typically in the $5 to $6 million range, I'd say, in that neighborhood. We do it every 2 years, and the primary reason we do that is because we have a lot of big needs in Utah County that we kind of have this, I call it the missing middle. UDOT has a lot of money to do the big stuff. Locals take care of local roads pretty well. Or there's that middle area where like the major collectors or minor arterials they're a little bit too expensive for a city to typically be able to fund themselves, but they're smaller or they're not a state facility. So, so they don't really compete well for state funds or UDOT funds. So MAG's kind of trying to fill that gap as much as we can. But if you have a project, say for example, the airport last time, or both times the airport was funded through MAG, you know, they were $15 and $18 million each. If the pot is only, you know, $60 million, that's a tough pill to swallow, that big of a project. I'm not pointing out Provo, I'm talking about any project that size. But when the pot is $120 million, then it's kind of like, okay, yeah, we can afford some bigger projects, but spread it out, still be able to spread it out because we have a lot of mouths to feed, so to speak. Yes, sir.
So my understanding is that UDOT, like it has its own money and its own process, but it still is constrained by the RTP, right?
Correct.
It can't build things that aren't on the RTP.
That is correct. That is correct. Now, would it be unlike the legislature to say, go build this project, UDOT, and we have to scramble and make some adjustments to make it work? Yeah, if that happened, it wouldn't be the first time, but UDOT themselves really try hard. Now, if it's not in for phase 1 of the RTP, we're not really in that business. So basically, that's the difference between the two processes. One is the big stuff, the UDOT stuff. Hey, we need a new interchange, we need a new freeway. Then MAG is hey, we need to make a new connection here, or we want to build this regional trail, or we need a little bit of money to help us with the airport. That's where we're filling in. Yeah.
So can that money be used as a match for federal funds?
Yes, it can.
A grant and you want a bigger project.
Yes, it depends on the project. We get federal funds. So a lot of the money that we program is federal funds, but we also have county funds that we can program. And typically, if we know that a project is if the project is going to be a match to a larger grant, then we will give it county funds, so it can, because you can't match federal funds with federal funds. One caveat a little bit for us on that, and this is just kind of the way MAG does it, and I think it's a good way. We really shy away from, if you came to us and said, hey, we need $10 million to match $100 million that we're hoping to get. The hard part about that is well, I've just encumbered $10 million that you hope you're going to get a project. So typically what we will do in that is we'll say, can you build a piece of that project for $10 million, and then if you get a grant to build the rest of the project, then great, let's package it all together and do it that way. Spanish Fork recently has done that, where they're like, hey, we need to rebuild Main Street for a few blocks, give us X amount of dollars, and by the way, while we're waiting for the money to be available, we're going to see if we can get a larger grant to do the whole thing, and then we'll just use your money to match it and get it all done at once. So that's one thing that we've done. Go to the next slide, will you really? Let's try it. So basically there's those two core projects, the RTP and the TIP. The TIP, I said the RTP is like a general plan. The TIP is kind of like your capital facilities plan, that plan where you're saying, hey, this is the next 5 years, this is our revenue that we have for the next 5 years. This is how these are the exact projects and the exact amount of money that we're gonna set aside for these projects in these years. It's real money. We talk about fiscal constraint and money in the RTP, but it's just kind of play money. The TIP is where the rubber meets the road and actually identify funds for specific projects. Go to the next slide. So our RTP, as was mentioned, it's a 4-year data-driven plan. We have to do it every 4 years. It's fiscally constrained, as I mentioned, which means, well, I already mentioned that. We break it up into 3 10-year phases. So phase 1 for this next RTP will basically be 2026 through 2036. 2036, phase 2 will be 36 to 46, and phase 3 will be 46 to 55. Air quality conformity I talked about, it does contain or need to contain all road, transit, and active transportation projects that are of a regional scale. So for example, local roads or even collectors, we typically don't show those in the plan. Transit, if it's a local bus route, we're not gonna show that in our plan. Active transportation, we had a while where we were throwing everything in the kitchen sink as far as AT into our plan. We're trying to raise the level of, we're only interested in those real regional trails. Local trails are great, don't get me wrong, but we're mostly interested in planning for the larger regional stuff. And as we said, locals, MAG, UDOT, UTA are all involved in the development of that process. Go to the next one. I think really we've covered most of this. Yeah, a lot of it, just what I would say is the RTP starts with you. It starts with local communities. Our basis where we start from is your plans, your land use plan and your transportation plan. Something very important to point out, MAG is not in the land use business. We take your land use and we incorporate that into your land use plans, and we incorporate it into our models. Why don't you go to the next slide? Right now, we're currently at kind of in the middle stage of developing our new plan, where we've basically gathered up all of the potential projects out there. If somebody drew a line sometime during a charrette or something and said, what about this idea, or what about that idea? Or, you know, we took old plans, we took anything in the kitchen sink and said, okay, let's gather all these plans, these projects together, and we're starting to screen through them and say, okay, does this really need to be on the plan? Yes or no? If no, then it can either just be forgotten, or it could go into like a vision project, something that's beyond the 2055 horizon, or maybe it just doesn't make sense at all. A good example, Lehigh up where Vern and I live, somebody one time drew a line up through the new Texas Instruments fab that they're building. We put that on the map, and we're like, oh wait, yeah, that can't be there. We're not gonna tear down a brand new fab to build a road, right? So that's where we're at right now. We're gathering that, we're refining that, and the next stage is where we're going to start taking all these projects and really start diving into the technical aspects of each of those. I want to go to the next slide really quick. Please.
You have to rewrite the plan every 4 years,
Yes.
but it's a 30-year plan.
That's correct.
So does that just mean it just keeps bumping 4 years ahead?
Yes.
For 30 yeyears?
Correct.
You're reframing your 30-year vision every 4 years.
We're not starting from scratch, but we're building off that, and we're adjusting, right? That's how we kind of try and keep up with the pace of development and growth and change. Typically, our horizon year will which is 2055, that last year. Typically, that will stay still for maybe 2 plans, even 3 plans sometimes. Our last plan, the horizon year, was 50. This year, everybody in the state said we're all going to 2055, and so it just made sense. We're technically only required to go out 20 years by federal law, but 30 years is, you know, most people try and keep it closer to 30 years, and that's why we're going to 55.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
One of the things is, we talk about the 3 phases, and we think that, okay, before we can build anything in phase 2 or phase 3, we got to build everything in phase 1, and that doesn't happen that way. In fact, we have a phase 1 project under construction now that's been in phase 1 for 30 years. That's the University Avenue Viaduct. So the new bridge on University Avenue has been a phase 1 project. I was here 25 years ago, so I've been here 3, so it's 30 years been here. 30 years we've been advocating for that.
There are also things that have been on the plan since the 1980s that have never been.
Yeah,
Phase 3 projects.
absolutely. They stay in phase 3 for whatever reason, and then there are things that get amended, new ideas, and then might come in at a phase 1 or phase 2. They don't start always at the bottom of phase 3.
Yep. And part of how that gets, part of the reason why that is the slide up here. We start with looking at population growth and density, because a lot of our travel demand model is basically based off of where people live now and are going to live, and where are jobs now and in the future. That's what the travel demand model really cares about. And that's not to say it just only cares about commute trips, but how it thinks about you going shopping is we put a job in a location that is a retail job. And the travel demand model says, oh, you're going to go shopping, therefore I'm going to create a trip to go shopping, or I'm going to create a trip to go to school because there's a job that is a school job here. So that's basically how the travel demand model works. You can see our modeling shows that we're going to expand, we're going to grow by 2055. If you want to go to the next slide. To put that in perspective, right now we're just a skosh under 800,000 people in Utah County. We will grow to almost 1.4 million by the end of this plan, 2055. In comparison, Salt Lake, you can see next to them, Salt Lake is around 1.3 million right now, Salt Lake County. So we will exceed their population by 2055 that they are now. You can see in blue, that is the growth between now and 2055. We will grow quite a bit more than Salt Lake County will grow over that time period. In fact, the state modeling shows that we will grow more than Salt Lake, Weber, and Davis combined over that time period. So that is what is driving congestion. That's what's driving all these needs that we have. It's that growth. If you go to the next slide, I talked about jobs. This is the other piece of the puzzle is, well, where are jobs going to be? You can see on the left for 2025, kind of a generalization of where job densities are, and you can see by 2055 where predictions are showing they're going to be in the future. Obviously, Provo, Orem, the I-15 core still maintains being the kind of central business district of our region, but it's certainly starting to spread into other locations, and that's actually a really good thing. Why don't you go to the next slide? An unfortunate thing about jobs is, and this is something that we don't control, it's developed by the Gardner Policy Institute at the University of Utah. They don't think our job growth is going to be as rapid as our household growth. They have national models that they base all this upon to tell us why they think that is the case. This is somewhat of a concern. It's not the end of the world, but it's something that we continue to advocate to them, saying, hey, certainly if we're going to grow that much in population, we're going to grow more in jobs as well. And so we continue to work with this, but these are the numbers that are given to us, and this is how we're going to have to deal with it. But yes, we are going to continue to grow with jobs. It's just, we would like to see more jobs, certainly in our projections. Go on to the next slide, please. These are just kind of current travel trends. You can see the kind of pinkish orange over on the left, that's the Cedar Valley area. You can see for right now, about 24% of their trips are going to Salt Lake County. 66% of their trips are going to the North region, which is basically everybody else in the north besides Linden. That's kind of Linden, north of Linden and up. You can scooch over to the central one. That's the one you're probably mostly interested in. About 48% of your trips are going north. 17% of trips are going all the way to Salt Lake, and 34% are going south. That number does not include trips.
What about the ones
Yeah,
that stay
what's
in
the
the central?
percentage?
Yeah, that does not include the number that stay within. I don't have that number right here, but obviously a lot of them stay
So
in
of
all.
the ones that leave their own area,
Yeah.
that's the percent.
Yes, of the ones, of the trips that are leaving a region, a sub-region, I should say, that's how many are leaving, right? And so you can kind of see travel patterns. We would anticipate them staying relatively stable, but yeah, it is, there's a lot of commuting that's happening. And so, yeah, just interesting information to have. Why don't you go to the next slide? This is one example of multiple maps that we generally show of this. And this is kind of what a depiction of what our travel demand model kind of puts out. You can see everything in red and dark is bad and scary. That means sitting in your car far too long, and the lighter colors are happy,
Flying
right?
by you on a bus.
Yes,
Flying by.
exactly. If we just build what we have already programmed right now, but allowed growth to happen to 2055, on the left, you see how congested our valley would be. It would not be a happy place to be. Our 2055 on the right side, what we did is we took our old plan, all the transportation projects, we built them in the model, and we put the 2055 population in, and we say, okay, it's not terrible, right? I mean, there's certainly some red we need to deal with, and that's why we update these plans, but it's not awful. But this is kind of an example of the kind of things that we're trying to work on. We go to the next slide.
Can we go back one? I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
On the, okay. Okay. I saw what I needed to.
Okay, cool. Good, yeah. So how do we, when we talk about phasing, how do we go about this process? What do we do? And basically, this is kind of an example of how we start with this process. Everything on the left, on the very left side of the map, where we would say, okay, let's build all of the population and employment growth that we think we're going to see out through the first phase, but not change the the transportation network. And where is it red? You know, where do we see problems, right? That's what that map on the left is. Then we go to the map in the middle and we say, okay, well, let's start coming up with projects to try and fix the red colors. And then we build those into the travel demand model on the right and say, okay, did we get out the red, or did we fix the red? Something I have to say, unfortunately, we're never going to get rid of all the red. So if you're looking for all green lights and never having to sit in congestion, unfortunately, it's just not realistic. It would be nice, but it's not realistic.
Another question on your methodology here. You do not do a differential with each project individually, right? You do them all at once, you run the model, and you take them.
We typically do them phase by phase.
Right.
We can, and it depends on the project and the problem, right? If there is a location that we're going to have, we can't figure out what the correct solution is, or there's lots of different ideas of what the solution would be, then we could do individual model runs of those. But something for everybody to understand, the travel demand model covers all of the Wasatch Front. So when they get it all programmed and ready to go and they push play, basically start, it takes 8 to 10 hours for that all the computing to happen before you get a result. And you hope that the results, you hope that it didn't time out or there was an error or something like that.
Well, 8 to 10 hours is skipping a number of steps too.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot that goes into this. It's not like, oh, tweak this and push play again. It reads for 8 to 10 hours, then you have a day or two of analyzing, checking it out, making some adjustments. So.
But my point was to say that you can't look at, oh, this one project is needed because of this regional concern, because you looked at them as a block.
We can get to that stage, and we do, especially we talked about quarter plans, right?
Yeah.
Almost always when a quarter plan or a quarter analysis is done, that's exactly what they're doing.
But not in the RTP.
Generally not in the RTP, but we often in that 4-year time frame, like Vern mentioned, we do a lot of like, okay, what's a problem spot that we need to start looking at? Let's do a corridor study, or let's do some more finite work to look at a specific corridor. And then we do get into those level of things. And like I said, we do lots of different corridor studies. Cities do their own corridor studies all the time.
How I used to make my money, right? There's nothing worse than pushing the button at 5 o'clock, running the travel to band model, and coming in at 8 the next morning and see that you had an error.
Yeah.
That's frustrating.
Yeah, that happens to me all the time.
Yeah. Yes.
I was actually at a event the other day, and they said that, I see you have I-15 marked. They said that I-15 will never be expanded again. The state has said that. Is that a true statement?
So when people say that, I think really when they say it won't be expanded, what they're saying is there's kind of a rule in transportation planning and transportation design that a freeway reaches a point where if you add another lane, the amount of weaving that it adds to it actually reduces the overall capacity of the project. So essentially, I-15 in most parts of Utah County, especially like Provo North, is basically as big from the main travel lanes as it's going to get. But there's tons of things that we can do on the sides of it, like create collector-distributor systems. Many of you are familiar with...
Change they did with like...
Yeah.
15?
Where more like if you're driving up to Salt Lake and you want to get off on, is it 17th,
13th or 9th.
13th, 17th, or 9th?
They share an exit.
They share an exit, and
90th and 72nd.
Exactly.
yes, exactly. Because what really slows down the main line, UDOT's primary function is keep the main line going.
Going at a constant rate.
Yes, as much as we possibly can. Friction is what slows down that, and friction is created by cars trying to get on and off or having to do a lot of switching. That's why UDOT really will grit their teeth if they have to build an interchange too close to another interchange. And if they do, then they'll try to do something like a collector distributor and managed motorways. I mean, there's so many different things that we can do and that we're going to have to do to I-15, but we're certainly not, okay, we're done and it's never going to get better. But that does bring up another point that we at MAG are really concerned about, and UDOT is concerned about, and we're kind of getting to kind of a important point. I mentioned we're going to be like Salt Lake population-wise in about 30 years. Salt Lake has some congestion already, and they have I-15, 215, 80, the 21st South Freeway, tracks, Front Runner. They have Mountain View. We have I-15, and we have a lake in the middle, right? And so there's going to have to be some big stuff built in the future sometime. I put it this way. Salt Lake County is kind of like me. Their network is a little aging, get a little big in the middle, but they have a mature network up there. Utah County, from a roads network, we're still kind of the teenager with a squeaky voice when it comes to building a robust transportation network. And we have this problem, we've got a big lake in the middle. Why don't you go to the next slide really quick? We're working through this process. It takes 4 years. They give us 4 years to do it because it takes 4 years to do. We're right now starting that. We gathered all those projects. We got some initial thoughts about them. We're going to start prioritizing and phasing, doing some of the stuff I was just talking about. We're going to have to start looking at fiscal constraints, air quality, public involvement, all these things with the goal of adopting the plan in June of next year. In this fall, that project prioritization and phase, that's where we'll start rolling that out to communities to say, okay, we've done most of the analysis. This is where things are landing. Let's start talking about what's going to happen. Yes, ma'am.
So this regional transportation plan is for all of MAG's areas, so from
Correct.
Davis and Weaver
No.
all the way down, or is it just
Utah County? It's just Utah County. Wasatch Front Regional Council, which is our sister agency, they cover Salt Lake, Weber, Davis, a little bit of Box Elder, and then Tooele. We just cover Utah County. That's actually a really good thing because that separation helps us with air quality, but it also means cities like Provo have a bigger say at the table as opposed to being part of a much larger organization.
We used to have a travel demand model that was just for Utah County. So MAG had their own, and Wasatch Front Regional Council had their own. Now those two are combined, and the Wasatch Back has their own travel demand model. So Heber City, Park City, that Summit County. There's a good advantage to look at it holistically. And as a consultant, we'd run the travel demand model, and we'd look at a corridor specifically, like Greg was talking about. That what consultants do is they take a look at the particular corridor and run that model. And you could look at, when I ran the model, I could look at, if I'm doing a North Legacy corridor, for instance, that's a study I did, right? North Legacy corridor, and then I'd look at what the impact of that North Legacy corridor facility made on Provo. And so 2 cars. But that shows our regional connectivity, right?
But a project in Draper or Sandy can have a big impact on North Utah County. And so that's the benefit. And we heavily coordinate. Both of our entities, WFRC and ours, we work together on developing the model. So it's really a good coordination done. Any other questions about the regional transportation plan? I want to hit on the tip really quick and then we'll open up to any questions you have. So this is not your only opportunity, but I don't want to move ahead quick. All right, let's go to the next slide. One last thing about the regional transportation plan, something that is very unique to Utah. In other words, nobody else in the country does this, is we have a unified transportation plan. Probably 20 years ago, some people in the legislature said, wait a second, WFRC, you have a plan and your horizon year is 2050, but MAGS is 2055. And in MAGS, you guess that a lane of freeway, or let's say a freeway interchange costs $30 million, but they say it costs $40 million. You guys really got to get together to put all this together. So from that moment on, we have what's called the Unified Transportation Plan. We still do our own plans, but we have unified cost assumptions. We have shared terminology and mapping. We have unified revenue assumptions with shared funding across the state. And we take all those inputs that are given to us, we do our plan, and then they all get stitched together to create Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. We've done it for 20 years. Nobody else in the country has been able to come close to duplicating it.
And so MAG,
it is very much a unique thing.
WFRC, UDOT's rural plan, Dixie, and Cache County, all 5 of those entities combine into one transportation master plan for the unified plan. And I got the privilege of writing Utah's first unified transportation plan, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Write that first one, and then having the Secretary of Transportation standing up and visiting Utah and holding that plan up, saying, Utah, you're doing something no one else in the country does. So it's pretty cool to see Secretary of Transportation praise the state.
Yeah. It's a cool thing. It does have its drawbacks, but it is a cool thing. We won't get into the drawbacks, but anyways, go to the next slide. Let's talk about the TIP now. The TIP, again, is kind of your capital facilities plan, what we're going to actually do in the next 5 years. It's, again, another federally required document, and it's a multi-year plan looking at basically how are we going to spend our money into the future. Key aspects of it, it covers all transportation modes. We have to identify all the funding sources being in there, and we have to be fiscally constrained. We have to be able to show, yes, in 2030, we really are going to have this money, and we are going to be able to build this project. It covers at least 4 years, and we update this every year, right? And it includes all regionally significant. So again, no offense, we're not interested in your local plan, your local roads, or even your kind of minor collectors. That's just our plan. We're just kind of those minor arterials and above kind of thing. So in this, and we'll talk about it in a minute, the MPO or MAG has, I already talked about this. MAG has the programming capabilities for a certain amount of funds. UDOT has a certain amount of funds that they can program. UTA has a certain amount of funds that they can program. All those get combined together and are adopted under MAG's TIP. MAG's TIP then gets combined, kind of like the Unified Transportation Plan. It gets combined with the UDOT rural plans and all the other MPOs TIPs to become the STIP, the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. I know, I don't make this stuff up, but that's how it works. Go to the next slide. Currently, this might be a little bit old, but everybody likes to see this. Currently, there's about $3.9 billion with a B programmed through 2031 in just Utah County, consisting about 212 projects. It's a lot of money. Why don't you go to the next slide? So I talked about MAG's process. We do it every 2 years. We have about 110-ish million every 2 years that we do this. It consists of federal, local funds, and some state funds when we can make it work. One thing, I'll just briefly mention this, one thing that MAG does uniquely is we exchange as many of our federal funds with UDOT as possible. There's got to be some stars that align to make that work. But basically, we let UDOT keep some of our federal funds. We take state funds in return for that. And basically, there's nobody from the federal government in here. That way, we can get rid of all the federal requirements, all the federal red tape. We actually take a 15% hit on that for every dollar we give UDOT. We only get 85 cents back. But as NOAA and anybody that's built a project with these funds, they're like, money well spent. And so that we do that when we can. It's community driven, i.e. we're not out there saying, Provo, you're going to ask for this project, Provo, you're going to ask that project, Provo, or whoever wants to apply for projects, they choose what they want to apply for as long as it's eligible. It's got to be supported or included in the RTP, like we said. And it's just those kind of regional facilities, major collectors, minor arterials, intersections, regional trails, transit projects, etc. Some examples of projects, you know, we funded a couple of phases of the airport. Everybody's aware of that. Several phases of Lakeview Parkway. We gave money to UTA to make UVX free for the first 3 years. We didn't give all of it, but a portion of it. The UVX station on 9th East is a project that we funded. So multiple projects. The people that determine what projects get funded are the MPO board, that group of all the mayors, county commission, etc. The things that we look at, we look at congestion, mode choice. Congestion is for road projects. We have a bunch of measures to understand, try to identify what are the best road projects. Mode choice are those transit type projects and comparing those and scoring those. Active transportation, we have metrics that look at what are the best active transportation projects. And then we also lump in safety, environment, and regional nature in kind of that decision-making process. Go to the next slide. Eligible projects, you can see, you know, new roads, widening projects, intersections, active transportation, airport, regional transportation studies, new transit service, et cetera, et cetera. Roads must be on the state functional class map. All capacity projects must be in your transportation plans first. All capacity projects must be listed or supported in the RTP, and we need to have leadership consent, i.e. the mayor and or the city manager says, yes, I know what my guys are asking for, or gals, and I'm okay with that. Probably, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, we got in a meeting where the process was already up and going, and a mayor said, wait, my guys asked for what? You know, they didn't know exactly what their own community was asking for. So we said, okay, we better put a stop to this. At some stage, we have to get the consent of leadership. This is what we're asking for. Go to the next slide. Funding, all MAG projects, we talked about the 3 different colors of money. All of our projects have a 6.77% match. Somebody's going to say, where did you come up with 6.77%? That's crazy. Basically, all federal funds across the country, for most states, the match is actually 80-20. 20% local match on 80% of the federal funds. Because the state of Utah has so many federal lands, they said, well, we're gonna cut you guys, that you can't tax, we're gonna cut you a break, and the rate is only 6.77%. Where, how they did the math for 6.77%, I don't know. We are actually the second lowest percent in the nation. Nevada is the lowest, and I think it's around 5%. I don't know exactly the number, but it's just slightly lower than ours. All projects have to use the UDOT cost estimating spreadsheet. All estimates have to be done based on a federal project because you may end up with federal funds being awarded. We talked about exchange funds. In this next selection process, most of the money is going to be 2930 and some of 31 as well. Next slide. The UDOT transportation process, their prioritization process, they have 4 different ones. TIF highway, which is surprisingly for highway projects. TIF active, that's a cutout just for active transportation projects. TTIF is for transit projects, and then TTIF first mile, last mile is specific for projects connecting, active transportation connecting to major transit facilities. They have roughly about $1 billion. It depends on the year to program. Sometimes it's a lot more. They have to be in an RTP phase 1 to be in the process. But the nice thing about their process is if you have a phase 1 fiscally constrained project, it automatically goes through the process. You don't have to apply or anything. It's just, they do it automatically. And this is again for the major stuff, the big stuff. I call them the big dogs, the big projects. And then the Transportation Commission is the final say on what gets funded and what doesn't get funded. One last thing I'm going to hit on is our corridor preservation program. Provo has been very successful in the past using this, but basically every time you register a vehicle, you pay a $10 fee. That fee goes into a fund just to purchase right-of-way or properties that will be used in the future for a new corridor. And basically they look at it, 1, it's going to be cheaper now. 2, we don't want corridors to acquiring right-of-way be the holdup for a project being built. And the third thing is, and many of you around the table know, when we draw a big line on a map in front of somebody's house, it's really hard to sell that house sometimes because an astute purchaser would look at these plans and say, hey, wait, this is going to be a 5-lane road in front of my house. I'm not going to pay you what you think it's worth. This allows them to be kind of made whole through that way. We generate about $5 million annually, which is not enough, but we do what we can with it. Purchases are limited to RTP projects, and some of those properties we purchase, they may just sit there for 30 years. Some of them, we buy them, and the next couple of years, we've got a project that we're ready to go. So it just depends on corridor and the opportunities, and we try to be as opportunistic as we can. Okay.
Okay, we got a couple minutes for Q&A. Additional questions, comments?
I'll even take good jokes.
I'm curious about your timeline for doing the bridge in East Bay.
So the East Bay, meaning going to the south. So that's currently a project. I believe that's beyond the 30-year time horizon right now. But as we do this update to the plan, that could be moved up. Likely, I hate to say likely moved up, but it just kind of goes towards the needs that we have. And that bridge really becomes crucial when we start talking about having an alternative to I-15. If you want to ask Bob what keeps him up at night, nothing. But if something did keep me up at night, it would be I-15. And we don't have a lot of good options, but most of the good options that we have would include either going over that bay or coming over and hugging I-15 for that little stretch, which is not ideal either. A lot of people tell us, well, why don't you just go down the east side or the west side of the lake? Which in our future plans, we will have stuff like that. The problem is a vast majority of the travel that is on I-15 either has a stop in Utah County or it's originated in Utah County. So that would, if we did that, that would be a really expensive investment for not very many cars right now, right? In the future, certainly. One thing to note is UDOT MAG are working together to do a study called the North Utah County Planning and Environmental Linkage Study, which is basically one of our biggest problems is east-west mobility through North Utah County, Lehigh, Saratoga Springs, et cetera, American Fork, et cetera. This is going to look at that much more in depth than even the RTP would do, but it's also actually looking at the real feasibility of building a crossing of the lake. Can we actually do it? Is it going to cost $3 billion or is it going to cost $30 billion, right? Because there's a lot that hinges on any bridge across the lake. And so that's going to be a big step forward for us, is to be able to kind of understand, and all the engineers in the room are saying, yeah, I can build that. We can build a bridge. It's not a matter of can we do it. It's just a matter of what kind of crossing and how much are you willing to spend. And so that's kind of what that study is going to take a look at. And I think a lot of future plans will hinge on what happens because of that. Because if we can do it once, we can do it again, potentially. And how does that change the way we look at some of these big commute patterns? And Provo is certainly, you're not necessarily in the prime study area, but because a landing zone for that bridge could potentially be in Provo, that's when you guys are going to be brought into that conversation. And it's not like we're going to show up and say, hey, by the way, we're going to drop a bridge on Center Street, tag you're it. But just so you're aware, you're kind of a periphery, but because of that, you're certainly going to be fully involved in it. Good question. So hopefully the answer is we'll see. But again, it comes down to, again, I keep bringing it back up. We're going to be Salt Lake County, and we've got one freeway and a lake in the middle.
We could choose to not make the same mistakes that Salt Lake County made.
Which are?
Building too many freeways.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a radical, but I'm also a travel demand modeler.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are other ways that we could go about this, but we need to get people on board.
Sure.
Mode shift, there's lots of things.
Yeah, mode shift, land use change. You say you don't use land use change in your models, but that's how we'll solve this problem.
Yeah, land use is the huge key to that. We keep developing like a auto-oriented community. We're going to need facilities for autos. One thing I like to point out to people, I don't like to point out to people, but when people say, well, let's just build more transit, that'll fix the problem. Well, New York City, how much of travel do you think in New York City is on transit? What's the mode percentage? Anybody have a guess?
10%?
It's about 50%.
50%.
Chicago is only 30%. And these are like, you think Chicago, you think nobody drives in Chicago.
New York
right?
has 50% transit mode share, but it has 20 to 30% biking and walking.
Yeah, exactly. But that's because they have New York densities, right? We don't have anywhere close to that. Our mode shift right now, or our mode percentage is 2%, and we're hoping to bump it up to like 4 or 5. Right?
So I have a question. Have you, when considering these models and everything, this has been something that's been in the back of my mind for a long, long time, and I'm sure everybody here is going to groan for a moment. Yeah, exactly. As transportation is shifting to different types of modes, not just biking, walking, not just cars, but having this in-between space, is that taken into consideration when you're looking at future plans?
You know, that's a great question, and it's really hard. We are very aware of those things, but it's really hard to pin down, well, what number do you attribute to that? And the example I have for that is during COVID. So COVID hit, and we went from like, I think it was slightly under 10% of people working in their homes to well over 20 some odd percent. And everybody noticed during COVID, man, traffic is great. just that 10% change had a drastic change in how much traffic we could move, or how many people were out on the roads, let me say. And as COVID was winding down, everybody said, oh yeah, nobody's going to go back to offices anymore. Everybody's going to work from home. Well, we're starting to see that it's already crept back quite a bit. And that's just kind of an example of, you know, our last plan, we had a long conversation. What percentage then do we put in for the future to say are going to be home occupations versus just commuting to a office or whatever the case may be? And that's a tough thing because it has drastic changes. If we put in 20%, we would be really under projecting travel demand, and therefore we would not be doing a good job of people would say you're not doing a good job already, but that's one thing that would, you know, that would be, the answer to your question is, man, that is a great question. We don't know the answer. Autonomous vehicles, people say, when all cars, not even autonomous, if everybody drove a Tesla where cars are talking to each other, the efficiency of the freeway goes up dramatically, and we could actually get a lot more vehicles on the freeway. Because
and everybody takes 30% more trips.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's just kind of like
It's a double-edged sword.
Those are the things that we grapple with, and they're great questions, and we really try to figure out. But nobody knows the future like that. I mean, shoot, we're trying to figure out what it's going to look like in 30 years.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming and presenting. We're going to continue item 4 until next time, but Vern has something really quick he wants to do before we.
So, haven't heard?
Oh, hey.
Oh,
All right. Good job.
So we appreciate everybody's work on this. It is our partners, and that includes MAG and UDOT and our Utah County or local cities. Most importantly, it includes those funding partners and the City Council for being able to allocate funds for us, continue to improve our active transportation network, specifically our bicycle, and we get to present this as our gold award, and we'll be presenting the City Council and the Mayor March, the first meeting in March 10th. So we'll be going there and presenting that. We just wanted to show everybody on TMAC, this is really a big milestone.
Where does that get posted?
This one's going to get hung up right out here. But I have one for the mayor's office and one for the city council office as well. And then, Lisa, what we're going to do, there's a smaller version, or maybe it's the same size. I think it's the same size. We get to put up throughout the community.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
Oh, replace all our silver signs?
Yes, yes, we are. And so we're going to replace those, and we may look at, rather than just putting them on the bike corridors, putting them at the entrance to our community. So a little bit different look at that. So anyway, it took us about 8 months to fill out the application. The application was over 90 pages long. We edited it last June, and we got word last month. There are only 2 cities in the state of Utah that have received the Gold Award. So Provo and then Park City / Schneiderville Basin. Okay? So, just wanted to share that with you.
If you don't mind, I'm going to sneak out, but.
Well, I had a question.
We're
adjourned.
Oh, okay, good. I will say that.
Thank you guys so much for coming today, and we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Yeah.